Outlines of Romantic Theology by Charles Williams. Chapter 1. The term Romantic Theology. Theology, which is the science of God, is generally divided into various classes: dogmatic, moral, pastoral, ascetic, mystical. But there is a side of it which is concerned with so definite an experience and such exact intellectual deductions that it may be convenient to regard it as a class in itself, more especially as it has, on the whole, been rather neglected by experts in the other divisions, and left to the poets and artists. The name given to this side of the science might well be Romantic Theology. This term does not imply, as will inevitably at first be thought, a theology based merely on fantasy and dream, and concerning itself only with illogical sentimentalities. It is a theology as exact as any other kind, but having for cause and subject those experiences of man which, anyhow, in discussions of art, are generally termed romantic. The chief of these is romantic love, that is, sexual love between a man and a woman, freely given, freely accepted, and appearing to its partakers as one of the most important experiences in life, a love which demands the attention of the intellect and the spirit for its understanding and its service. That there are other human experiences of the same far-reaching nature is undeniable. Nature and friendship are perhaps the chief, and these will be touched on in the last section of this essay. But this book is concerned almost entirely to make some attempt to formulate, for the help of students, the principles of romantic theology as applicable to romantic love, and it does not profess to do more than sketch the outlines of the subject. The excuse for its existence is that, though a good deal has been written on the subject, especially by the great love poets, the author does not know of any book which attempts to make a beginning of it as a scientific theological study. That a similar formulation may exist somewhere in the vast mass of Christian theology is only too probable, but if so, it does not appear to be particularly well known at the present day, and the present essay may therefore fall into the hands of some student of the subject who is, like the author, unacquainted with its predecessor. To students who do not accept the doctrine of the Incarnation, the suggestions made will probably appear fanciful. It is at any rate certain, as a compensation, that to no Christian can they appear as anything but natural and probable, even if in the end they should have to be, for one cause or another, rejected. In a sense, of course, any such study as the present is negligible, as all intellectual formulation of spiritual experience, and all schematization of it is negligible. There are lovers, as there are saints in all ages, who not only do not know, but do not care to know anything of the work of the mind, and they are sometimes the greatest lovers and saints. No knowledge of dogmatic theology is a substitute for a saving faith, nor of moral theology for the formation of the habit of moral obedience, nor of mystical theology for the practice of communion with God, nor is any theoretical doctrine in romantic theology the satisfactory equivalent for its practice. But theory may be a help to practice, and even sometimes an incentive to it. Romantic theology is no more than a basis, but the possibility of its sometimes being that is a reason for its formulation. Since romantic theology is a part of Christian theology, it will be understood that this essay is written entirely from the point of view of an Orthodox Christian. The rites and dogmas of Christianity, as set forth in the Book of Common Prayer of the Church of England, are assumed on the one side, as romantic love is assumed on the other. Intellectually, such a position implicitly assumes that the theologies of other religions are mistaken, but it is not, of course, denied that romantic lovers in any part or any age of the world have achieved their proper end, under whatever creed they professed. The present business is merely the formulation of Christian theology, not a denial or correction of others. But if this side of the book is limited, the other is universal. Love, as previously defined, is a normal human thing, although its development and progress must be modified and defined by the particular habits, social and religious, of its environment. It is, in another sense than that of the Vincentian canon, held semper et ubique et ab omnibus. It has been part of the work of Christianity in the world to make men aware of the spiritual significance of certain natural experiences. This has been attempted with sacrifice. It has been attempted with death. It has been attempted very little with romantic love. Yet any human energy that can be so described is capable of being assumed into sacramental and transcendental heights. Such is the teaching of the Incarnation. Thus, the distance between an ordinary meal and that nourishment which is communicated in the Eucharist should lessen, as it were, until perhaps, to the devout soul, every meal is an actual Eucharist in the theological sense. Nor would such a progress involve any invasion of the order of the Church, for it would be an additional and free grace of God. But much theology has been spent upon this sacrament, whereas comparatively little has been written upon the other sacrament of marriage. In general, the Church has confined herself to exhorting the newly married pair to observe their moral duties and their ecclesiastical, and to repudiating divorce more or less strenuously. And yet the universality, the intensity, and one might almost say the necessity of love might have suggested it as a subject for the most profound consideration. Such consideration the Church may yet find it possible to give, and that will be the age of romantic theology. It has been prevented from doing so in the past by various causes. For example, during the earliest age of the Church, her expectation of the immediate return of Christ distracted her mind from a subject which implied children and the continuance of the world. Again, her inevitable concentration upon another world, her existence, so to speak, in that world and merely partial appearance in this, tends to cause her to neglect the affairs of this world, and by consequence to regard with suspicion any sacrament accompanied by and indeed consisting of human delight. The Church has always not unnaturally been haunted by a Manichaeism which, driven out by dogma, has returned as a vaguer but pervading influence. This added to that necessary asceticism, which is the prelude to the profounder depths of mystical life, has resulted in an attitude towards marriage that seems to regard it, though officially calling it a sacrament, as in effect nothing much more than a matter of morals. Probably this attitude has been strengthened by the celibacy of the clergy, so long and so widely maintained. It would be demanding too much of the theologians, for most of them have been clerics, to expect them to be sensitive to the meaning and graces of a sacrament from which they have been debarred. In this only of the sacraments are the priesthood, not merely unessential in times of necessity, but almost unimportant at any time. Compelled by the mind of the Church to perform the ecclesiastical ceremony of marriage, whenever it is demanded, they find the same mind declaring that the celebrants of the sacrament are, always and everywhere, the two lovers, that the ecclesiastical ceremony, though of the bene esse, is not of the esse, of it, and that, in consequence, the priest, though a witness terrestrial and celestial, whose presence it would be the highest insolence not to invite, is hardly more. The position is novel, and the result not amazing. That the result, the neglect by theology of marriage as a sacrament, is undoubted could be shown by many quotations. These, then, are the official utterances, or rather the utterances of the officials of the Church, which is not quite the same thing. They are concerned largely with such moral matters as divorce and birth control, and so forth, a side of the subject with which this essay does not concern itself, except incidentally, so far as divorce is concerned, in a few tentative suggestions. And yet something may be gathered from the attitude which the Church has taken up on those matters, little as its officials, with few and lovely exceptions, seem to understand it. To them, in some way, divorce and birth control seem to have existed in no relation to marriage, awful laws of the absolute. It is the old error of substituting the very proper negation of certain means for the assertion of the end, which is to be attained not by those means. In marriage, as everywhere else, the Church is concerned with the regeneration of man. This regeneration, which will probably take eons before it can be dimly foreseen, is not to be brought about by an evasion of the problem. Now, divorce and birth control are both, in effect, evasions of the problem. It is the man and the marriage that is the problem. If you dissolve the marriage, if you artificially dissolve the connection between intercourse and birth, you may, with the happiest temporal results, evade the problem, but you have not solved it. It is, on the part of the Church, an instinctive grasp of this fact that has made her cling almost with passion to the problem, and has made her look such an obstinate fool to everyone else. She may, in a sense, fail to solve the problem. Humanly speaking, she has often failed, but she will not deny or evade it. There is no solution except some sort of regeneration, of transmutation, what you will. And the awful eyes that are fixed on eternity see this, though the no, no, no of her outcry sounds more like the voice of a peevish child or an hysterical woman. Footnote: Mr. D.H.S. Nicholson, in an admirable skit, has presented a land where everyone grows enormously fat on a very ordinary diet, and where the church vigorously opposes the general introduction of a medicine, after taking which meals can be freely eaten without any fear of too much fat. It is to be feared that the church would do so. It is also credible that the church would be right. Medicine, in such a case, would again evade the problem, though, alas, how beautifully. Such is the present ecclesiastical position, but its unsatisfactory nature is accentuated by the present secular position, chiefly by the flood of sex literature which has drowned the modern world. Our poetry, our fiction, our drama, our journalism are full of it, from Shakespeare and Marlowe, who invented it, to the middle page of any morning paper. It may be rightly argued that with great literature, say Antony and Cleopatra, one is concerned with poetry and not with sex. But though this is true of it all separately, from Tamburlaine to The Ring and The Book, or Emblems of Love, it remains also true that the continual choice of romantic love as a subject has the effect of constantly directing the attention of the mind to romantic love, a constancy of attention which is very bad for an unprincipled mind and not too good for a principled. Nor has this concentration of literature upon it been any too good for romantic love itself. There is in love, as in religion, a hypocrisy, or at any rate a foolish optimism, which is exceedingly like the truth, but is not the truth. It is no doubt true, as the Lady Julian of Norwich saw, that in the providence of God all things are well even at this present moment. All things are most well. But this is very different from a well-to-do tradesman's assurance that everything's for the best. So in love, it is most certain that the lovers are manifest to each other's eyes in their original perfection. But this is not the same thing as the rather silly convention of romance that only a pretended criticism of the beloved should be allowed a place. The romantic mind must, if it is to be justified, work within the bounds of realism, as indeed love itself does, for of all proverbs that which declares that love is blind is surely the most foolish. Love can only see the next world by virtue of that eyesight which sees and is not afraid to see the flaws in this. All other vision is blindness, all other faith superstition. That it can go on, this mush of sentimentality, this glowing romance, is to be doubted. Three things can happen. Perhaps one, perhaps all, will. First, there may be a reaction. We may pass off on to some other subject. It is to be hoped we shall. Second, we may proceed with Mr. D.H. Lawrence over the edge of humanity into some very real but rather awful physical mysticism, a mysticism already adumbrated by Rossetti and Swinburne. Thirdly, theology may take the marsh in hand and try to drain it. In such a work, this book tries, perhaps vainly, to handle a spade. But it does so not with any wish to sentimentalize still further an over-sentimentalized age, but with the hope of canalizing our emotions, leaving the rest of the land dry, for purposes of cultivation of other crops, and establishing a means of transport, by which such vessels as choose may proceed more effectively to their end. For convenience sake, and in order to avoid too much talk about love, the word marriage is used to cover the whole process of love, from its first appearance between two people to its remote and indefinable end. The rite of marriage and married life, as ordinarily understood, will be referred to in clear terms when necessity arises. It should also be said that, although the discussion throughout tends to be conducted from the point of view of the man, anything that is postulated of his experiences is postulated also of the woman's. Any differences in the deductions drawn from those rival and correlated experiences will be a matter for students when the principles have been laid down.